day before.
Here.
Commissioner Bauer.
Here.
Commissioner Boyd.
Here.
Commissioner Dowd.
Here.
Commissioner Jeffries.
Here.
Commissioner Lopez. Commissioner Coe.
Present.
Commissioner Washington.
Here.
There are 9 members present, a quorum, and we are to the adoption of the agenda.
A motion be in order to adopt the agenda. It's been moved. Are there any changes or questions regarding the agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the agenda is adopted. Now to approval of the minutes for the November 12th, 2024 meeting. Is there a motion in order, or there is a motion in order to approve those minutes? Is there a motion?
Yes.
Okay. It's been moved and supported. Are there any changes, corrections, additions, deletions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
There we go.
There we are.
Aye.
Thank you, Faith.
Those opposed? Nay? Passed unanimously. Public comment.
Okay, we have 2 people in the building who have signed in. We have Nicholas Zandy, followed by Robert B. Worthy, and you'll have up to 3 minutes to address the commission.
Okay, this is on, right?
Yes.
Okay, so, since you can hear me loudly and clearly, I am here to discuss, I am Nicholas Zandy, president of the Old Everett Neighborhood Association. I'm here to discuss 7B, and that is city council structure. Now, I want to make this very clear. I am not here to cause conflict between at-large members and ward members of the city council. What I am here to say is talking about what I want to be changed. And right here, right now, look, I can live with a strong mayor. Like, maybe a city this size is better off with a strong mayor. I get that. I could live without term limits because maybe there's a non-zero chance that one person could be voted out. It's happened a few times. But one thing I can't currently live with is currently having half the city council members be at large. Because of that, it's not an adequate way to represent a city this size. You've got 8 members, half of them at large. And because of that, lots of them can be from a certain point in this city. Previously it was mostly 4th ward getting overrepresented. Now it's mostly 2nd ward getting really represented. That needs to be rebalanced. We need to get rid of the at-large and increase the number of wards to 9 wards. And yes, I said 9 wards because the Old Everett neighborhood can actually act as a ward in its own right. It's got a big enough population, just under 10,000, that it can have a ward of its own. In fact, we have a council member who is at large who's from that neighborhood. She would be happy to take up that seat. The same thing goes for Forest View. They should have a ward of their own. And so going for 9 wards, it actually keeps the city much more well-balanced. And because of that, we don't have to break ties under any circumstances, and we'd have an odd number of council members. So because of that, I think 9 wards is the best way to represent it. And also considering that we've had competitive elections before, like in the 2nd ward and in the 1st ward, where certain parts of the 1st ward preferred Brian Daniels, while other parts preferred Ryan Cost. The same thing goes for the 2nd ward, where some parts of it preferred Tina Houghton, the others preferred Jeremy Garza in one election. So because of that, I think having more wards will actually give us much more adequate representation and will make it easier for all council members to not have to deal with as many constituents, and they can have a much more compact ward so that they can more adequately represent it, and more people can be represented and not left out, regardless of class or race. And we won't have too many council members who are from like a certain part of the city. That's all I need.
Thank you. Next, we have Robert B. Worthy.
Hi, I'm Bob Worthy. I am currently on Lansing Board of Water and Light. I'm a commissioner for Delta Township, and I have submitted about a 3-page document that explained my thoughts about having the non-Lansing commissioners vote. There's 8 members, 8 commissioners from the city of Lansing. There are 3 from the outlying areas. The 3 from the outlying areas do not get a vote. They're referred to as advisory commissioners. And one of the commissioners that services all the other areas except Delta and East Lansing, that individual only has a 1-year term. Everybody else has a 4-year term. And a 1-year term just doesn't make sense because the board is amazingly complex. It's very big. It's got 4 operating units that are very scientifically complex. And it takes a year to figure out what's going on. So that person's not going to be able to give any guidance for what the board should be because they're not going to understand it. So essentially, I'm just asking to take a look at this, and if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. But what I'm trying to promote is regionalism over tribalism, because the Board of Water and Light is not like any other commission that Lansing has, and I tried to illustrate that. The Board of Water and Light has to respond to all of its stakeholders. And the only way we know that I can support the Delta stakeholders is if I get a vote. Just sitting there and being there for optics doesn't make sense. I really think that this was added after the terrible storm we had in 2012 and 13. And I think it was just to try to placate some people and put a Band-Aid on a problem. And it doesn't really solve the problem. It doesn't give any representation to anybody. It just kind of looks like it does. So I left a minute for questions. That's very intimidating too, by the way. So if anybody's read what I presented, I would love to answer questions.
Commissioner Cowie.
Yes, my question was, if you guys are just advisory, what weight does your any advice that you give them, do they weigh that out, or it really is mute?
You can't tell. You can't tell. Here's what I can tell you. If you look at the horseshoe, the 3 advisory commissioners, there's a wall built between us and the rest of the commissioners. If I was sitting over here and wanted to talk to you, I'd have to leave the podium, come around, and it doesn't look like it, but I can't say that. I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Washington.
I just want to make a clarification. The Board of Water and Lights is a commission, not an advisory board. And the duties between a commission and an advisory board are vastly different. Commission actually has designated authority. They actually have tremendous input into who is the CEO, who are the top cabinet members. They have, I do believe, they can hire and fire the top guy, but a commission has much more authority than an advisory board, and that was just a point of clarification.
But those 3 people that's on that board, and I mean, he said
They
that
have
too.
no say.
They have no say.
No, we can talk. I've had one instance when the chair didn't recognize me, but it was a very confused meeting. It was voting on the rate hike. Our 2 officers weren't there, so it was a person kind of sitting in for the officers. And I addressed it. I wanted just to give some information. I did a lot of research, did a lot of comparables on benchmarking other utilities, just so I could explain where we were and where everybody else is. She said she didn't see me, and like I say, it was a very contentious meeting, and there was, I think she just wanted to get through it, and I can buy that, but I can talk, and I don't know that anybody's really listening to me, because it seems like when I've tried to address it on one-on-one, the answer seems to be, the Lansing owns the Board of Water and Light, therefore you shouldn't have any say in it. But Delta Township, that's where you're producing a vast amount of your energy. And all those rice engines that everybody has been coming in and complaining about as being not the best for the environment, they're going in Delta Township. Now, I don't think that's strategic. It's not strategic on the part of the board. That's where they need the power. But we've got the Delta plant over in the middle of Delta Township, and it's got this little island that's the city of Lansing, and it's really a fraud to obtain, maybe I shouldn't use fraud. It's a fiction to obtain the tax benefit they needed to save all those jobs. But we did that by this concept of regionalism, where the townships and all the other municipalities work together to save these jobs because it was so important for the city. And that's kind of what it's kind of a shirt tail argument to that says if we work together, we can do a better job, because The board stands for diversity and inclusion. And so how can you say that's one of your major tenets?
Sir, your time has expired. So
Oh.
thank you.
Oh, okay.
We
Thank
gave
you.
you some
All right.
leeway. So.
You did. You gave me bonuses, so the clock went on. Thank you.
All right, that was our last speaker signed in.
Okay, we're to officer reports. There is no chair report tonight.
No report from the vice chair.
Chris?
Yes, just a couple of things. First, just wanted to let you know that there were written communications that are in your packet. Also, you've been handed a budget update. And expenses to date are $141,500, leaving about $358,000 remaining of budgeted allocation. And then finally, I did want to point you to a memo that I wrote just, and it's not to say what has to be done or what should be done, but it's just some historical information about the structure of Lansing City Council. And it turns out that historically, from 1857 until the late 1950s, all council members were elected by ward for 2-year terms, and every year one member from each ward was elected. So they were kind of overlapping 2-year terms. Went from 3 wards, so 6 council members, although they were called aldermen at the time, at the origination, all the way up to 8 wards in the 1950s, so there were 16 aldermen. Aldermen, yes, specifically. And then the 1955 charter changed to councilmen. Yes, it said councilmen in the charter, not council members at that time. And that went to our current structure. And I have the census, the population listed in the chart that I gave you. And then also, the other thing that I wanted to point out is just a concern that I have had in the past with the wards being elected at different times. Every 10 years, it's required to rebalance the wards based on the census. And it has led to situations where people go for an extended period of time, some people, without the opportunity to vote on their ward representative. And I provided a map, and 2 of the areas went from, one from Ward 3 to Ward 4, and one went from Ward 1 to Ward 4. And both of the voters in both of those areas, the last time they voted on a ward council member was 2019, because 2021 was still under the old system and their ward was not up. And then 2023, they were moved to the new ward, so they didn't have the opportunity to vote on the ward council member because they had moved to, flipped to a different ward. Whereas Area A, those voters who went from Ward 4 to Ward 1 voted in both 2021 and 2023 on their ward council members. So just a concern that I have historically had with the fact that our wards are not elected at the same time.
Thank you. Commissioner Vice Chair.
Yes, and can I have clarity, Mr. Clerk? You sent us a memo earlier, and it says, as the commission enters a period of discussion and action regarding the structure of city council, please be advised that any changes to the number of wards will affect the composition of all boards and commissions.
Well, it doesn't necessarily, but it may.
Okay, I just want clarity.
So if you go to anything other than 4 wards, it would, really, because almost all city boards and commissions mimic the city council.
Okay.
And they are based on wards. So obviously you can't, if you go to 5 wards, you can't not have the 5th ward represented on the boards and commissions.
Absolutely.
So, but
We'll get to that.
If you change the number of at-large and don't change the number of wards, it wouldn't necessarily impact that structure.
Thank you.
could still have 8 members.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boyd.
I have a question, a clarification. If this commission were to recommend, say we would follow Commissioner Washington's recommendation and Mr. Zandi's recommendation and go to 9 wards, this commission doesn't decide where those 9 wards are, correct?
Correct.
It would be up to the city council.
That's correct.
They would, if the voters approved it.
Pursuant to the Home Rule Cities Act, the city council adopts the ward boundaries.
Very good, thank you.
That's what you told me.
Yes, the population has to be balanced within a certain range. So yes, it would be, but the lines would be adopted by city council, and the wards would be relatively equal population.
Commissioner Bauer.
So who actually comes up with the boundaries? Is it the clerk's office? I mean, then the city council would approve it, but
Yes.
it comes out of the clerk's office?
Historically, yes. And in fact, the current charter says that the election commission draws the boundaries,
Yeah.
which is slightly in conflict with the Home Rule Cities Act that says the city council adopts the ward boundaries. So what we've done is the election commission has made a recommendation, and the election commission is myself, the city attorney, and the city assessor.
Oh, okay.
And I've driven that process, but what we adopt has become a recommendation to city council.
Okay. All right, moving on to old business under A, Article 1-302, the non-discrimination and civil rights language. We had a long discussion about that at our last meeting, and we've had our city attorney follow up. There were a couple, I think, couple of questions from a couple of commissioners. She took them back and has presented new language to us, which reflects those concerns. Kristen, are you on? Can you hear us? And are you available? Yep, there she is. Did you want to update us on the letter that you sent? Can you hear us?
I am not able to hear if you can hear me.
I can hear you. So do we have someone in the back that can check that out? Yeah.
Can you hear us now, Kristen?
They're working on it.
Okay.
That is
Well,
a statement of
Commissioner Boyd?
I have a question, and I don't know if our attorney can hear me or not, but I'll ask the group since I wasn't at the meeting last time. On the second page, which I think offers language that perhaps you, Commissioner Huey, had recommended, I guess my question is, does what we are going to vote on tonight, match what the state of Michigan requires or has adopted in terms of non-discriminatory action?
As I understand it, the language that is on the second page, 2/3 of the way down, points point 1, point 2, and point 3, that language was derived by using what we had, incorporating the human rights ordinance that we have here in the city of Lansing, Elliott Larson amendments. I think there was a directive from the governor that was looked at. It is constitutional. I mean, it pulls from a lot of different parts of where the state regulations come from. It's probably some of the most comprehensive language that I think you'll find on a provision like this.
So-
And that was the goal of
So what I'm seeing here on page 2, as you said, of halfway down on the page, is in writing someplace. And we've just incorporated it into our suggestion.
We've pulled bits and pieces of it into that language, so it conforms. I mean, some of it was pretty much overlapping. So the stuff that was not currently, for example, in our human rights ordinance, we would pull, say, from the amendments to the Elliott Larson Act and bring in some of that language and incorporate it in here. So this, I think, incorporates most everything that we have looked at in terms of the authority that's out there.
Thank you.
Why don't we do this for right now? Why don't we, I don't want to table this, but maybe just move on to talk a little bit about 7B, city council structure. Go ahead, Council.
We could hear her. She want to give her presentation.
Yeah.
I like to chat.
Yeah, I don't have her contact information. She can, yeah, yeah. Emery, do you have her, can you send her an email or a text?
Yeah, we're
And ask-
emailing back and forth. What do you want me to ask?
Have her do the presentation if we can hear her.
Okay.
See her in here.
Please.
Hello, I'm told you can all hear me, and that you are now reviewing the document that I prepared that includes some additional language for the anti-discrimination portion of the charter. The purpose of this modified language was to incorporate some of the language and suggestions that have been provided by commissioners at the prior meeting. So it includes an incorporation of essentially characteristics that are protected by law, not only by Elliott Larson, but some of the other laws, I would say, that are more particular to employment practices, looking, for example, at medical condition, including genetic characteristics. But I think the idea in hearing from the board, from the commission at the last meeting, was that there was a desire to at least look at for consideration discussion on a comprehensive statement of anti-discrimination. And so the goal, again, was to incorporate some of the additional characteristics that have been referenced during commissioner comment at the last meeting. And those would include the medical condition, including genetic characteristics, linguistic characteristics such as accent, limited English, English proficiency, and then as an additional comment to ensure that any other bias prohibited by law, including any additional protections identified by law, so to encapsulate those types of characteristics which may not currently be recognized by law, but in the future would allow those to be encompassed within this provision of the charter. I'd also mentioned that there was some prior discussion in the last memo regarding this provision on an additional area of civil rights protection for pregnancy, breastfeeding a child, or expressing human milk. And so I made sure to include those provisions as well, again, to ensure that those provisions are stated there for your review and consideration, and that those, although often considered part of the sex or gender definition, by including these separately, that ensures that to the extent that those characteristics or conditions are not necessarily incorporated or reliant upon a gender or sex, that those are still protected nonetheless. Hopefully I can answer your questions if I can hear them. I may be on a bit of a lag with the online feed.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Commissioner Boyd.
Again, I wasn't here, I did watch the meeting online last time, but I wasn't here for the discussion. But I just have a question. And it has to do with some of the additions that have been added to the suggested change in what we're looking at. And it has to do with linguistics. I mean, I just want to be practical here. If somebody cannot speak English, how is it that we cannot discriminate against them? I mean, I don't want to discriminate against anyone, but if somebody can't speak English, how is it that they're going to be able to do a job? I don't understand that, and I wish somebody would explain it to me.
Commissioner Cowie.
The purpose of having that language there, just because I might have a very thick accent depending on what their culture is, it didn't say that they couldn't speak English. It says limited. But as long as they are proficient to do that position or job in that classification, just because I have a very thick accent because I'm from Sudan somewhere or wherever of the world, that they should not be discriminated against as far as not getting that position.
And I appreciate that, but that is not what this reads. This reads limited English, which is what you explained, or English proficiency. I don't see them as being the same. Sorry.
Do we have Kristen available? Can you shoot her that question, Emery?
Yeah, we're working
Okay.
on it.
All right. Thank you.
I hate to be so naive, but I just don't get it.
Commissioner Washington.
We have people that are American-born that don't speak the same way from perhaps the socioeconomic level that someone else has been raised in. And that doesn't mean they don't know English, and it doesn't mean they can't do the job, but they should not be discriminated against because of that. Do you understand what
But that's not what this reads to be. This is not how this reads to me. English proficiency tells me you don't understand English, or you can't speak English. I get the whole limited English business. I get different dialects from different parts of the country, but I don't get English proficiency. Sorry.
Commissioner Cowie.
At my current position at the hospital, we have people that speak very little English, but we have translators, iPads, we have
Interpreter services.
interpret services that use that we hire them. They are qualified to do the positions. Just because they come from whatever country or other side of the world, they are very proficient and they met the qualifications of the job. So we have made opportunities for them to communicate that, and they do an excellent job.
Vice Chair Simon.
And proficiency, I may not be as proficient as you are in a specific language or a job. So I think you're kind of breaking down the proficiency part about it. Doesn't mean they can't speak English, but even if they can't, as Commissioner Cowie says, organizations have provided interpreter services and other ways to communicate with people and contractors.
Okay. Yeah.
hasn't received the question. I do not know where she's at
Okay.
in terms of responding.
Can she watch us on YouTube? It's on YouTube.
Please do.
Mr. Chairman? Is it possible, Muhammad, that you could show us the language in the Sparrow Handbook that talks about English proficiency? I think the word that I'm having trouble with here is proficiency. I understand what everybody's saying, and I get it. But
Proficiency means a skill level, that you have gained a skill level to understand. So I get why you're stuck on that part.
So maybe we need a different word than proficient. And so I'd be curious to see what organizations like Sparrow use. Do they use the word proficient, or do they use something different?
Actually, the language that I brought was from a training. A civil rights training
Okay.
that I read the last meeting we had. And unfortunately, I did just send that off to Brian and Lori earlier today. So they're going to make sure that everybody gets it.
Commissioner Lopez.
Thank you. In Lansing, we may have an interesting issue here because we have many refugees, okay? And people that have lately come on status. So some of those individuals may be proficient in reading and writing, but not linguistically. So you may have issues with vocabulary, but they can read and write instructions. So I think that has to be something that the HR department would have to be careful with and understand, when they're hiring or any kind of business transaction, whether it be for employment or for buying or whatever. But no, that's just one example of where a person could be not proficient in speaking, but they could be in reading and writing. So.
We have Kristen with us. Emery?
Okay, on behalf of Attorney Ruba, that can be addressed in the employment discrimination section of the charter. In employment, an employer can require a level of English proficiency related to the job. Think a 311 call taker or a police dispatcher. But if language proficiency is not job related, then it can be discrimination to place proficiency requirements on the job.
Okay. So take that up in, I think, Chapter 3 when we get there. Okay, any other questions? Okay, as to the language that we have before us, is there a motion to approve? It's been moved. Is there support?
Second.
It's been moved and supported. Any other comments? All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Passes unanimously. And then that will be added to section 1302, which we're going to be taking up tonight anyway. So moving on from there, thank you, Kristen. Appreciate that. Still stay with us. City council structure under B. There were some materials that were sent out today. Some folks have had an opportunity to review them. Some have not. So I'm going to ask that we not deal with that issue tonight. What's that is going to do, as you know, we made a motion to table last week, and if you don't, either during that meeting or the subsequent meeting, pull that item off the table, it automatically dies. So that motion will expire at the end of the meeting tonight, and we'll just come back to it when we take up the issue again. I would ask, and I'll just reiterate it at the end of the meeting, if you have changes or comments, please, and we won't be able to do that for this week. We've got a meeting in a week from today. But if you can get those changes or potential amendments, proposed amendments to Emory by Thursday before the meeting, so we can all get them in time to be able to review them and be prepared to respond to them. I would appreciate it. So with that, Commissioner Washington.
On that topic, we were asked to bring our thoughts on city council structure, and I would like to hand mine out before, so people can
Sure.
do it for the, be prepared. Thank you.
Thank you. Oops, okay.
And also, I will tell you that Jasmine, and particularly myself, we are everywhere, and I did have a meeting last night with the leadership of probably the strongest and largest neighborhood group, which is Churchill Downs, and they are asking, because of the holidays and because there are such strong opinions on this topic, they would prefer that we not vote for it, on it until after the holidays, to give them an opportunity to come together as a neighborhood group and to voice their opinions. And if you all would ever want to attend neighborhood meetings, it's a really good place to really find out what the people are thinking, because they couldn't all make it to our listening sessions. And like I said, I'm everywhere. I go to all of them. Jasmine is a lot of places too. So I just think I would ask that this commission consider not voting on this until sometime in January, so people have a time to comment.
Commissioner Boyd.
And when can we expect that? Will they come to our meeting? Do we have to go to them?
No, they don't want you to go to them. They'll come here, they'll
They'll
send
come here, so
emails,
we'll be
they'll
hearing-
do in the comment section.
So we'll hear from them?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, moving off that item, we're to new business. This hopefully is the beginning of our line-by-line review of the charter. We're going to be taking up Article 1 tonight. Emery, do you have what you presented for us to appear up on the screen? No. Oh. Yes, if you could, please. What I would suggest that we do, Emery did send out a copy of the article. It's noted on there, the chapters and the sections, as well as the lines. So it's easy to be able to refer to that document on any questions or comments that you may have. I would suggest that as we go through the article, we deal with it by chapters, and then within the chapters, we'll deal with the sections. I would like to get through the sections, and as soon as we get through the sections on all the chapters, or on a chapter, that we take a vote at that point. The vote would be to either approve as is or as amended, with the idea and understanding that if, as we go through the charter, for example, with the definition section, if we find that we want a new definition or we want to redefine something, that we can circle back and deal with that specific section, but at least start taking positions on these, so if we don't go back, then those are final decisions of the commission, which I think would, at the end anyway, we would take a final vote to approve the entire revised charter. So if that's non-objectable, we'll proceed down those lines. So looking at Chapter 1 under government, and I'm not going to read these, I already did, it was kind of boring. Looking at Section 101, establishment of government, this establishes this as the city of Lansing, as I did bring it up before. Now is the time, and I know if Chris had an ability to make a motion, he would, but you can now change the name of the city to the city of Swope.
There we go.
Yeah, there you go, but you
I
know,
like it.
Yeah, but you don't have a vote, so. With that, are there any questions, concerns, any amendments to the language found in that section? Commissioner Boyd.
You're talking about Chapter 1. I'm actually on, I've got a suggestion on 205 definitions. Is that?
No,
is this the
we're
appropriate
on just
time?
101 at the top.
Okay, I'll wait.
We'll go section by section. Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Washington?
I would move that we approve it as is.
Is there support?
Support.
Okay, it's been moved and supported. Well, let's do the chapter. And let's do that. I think it might be a little bit easier. Section 102, boundaries. Any questions or comments on that? Hearing none? Yeah, sure.
Can you fix mine?
You can do anything you want. There you go. So on Chapter 1, Section 1, with 101 and 102, is there a motion to approve? It's been moved by Commissioner Washington.
Second.
It's been moved and supported. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Wow, got past Chapter 1. Chapter 2. Whoops, I'm sorry. Commissioner Lopez, I apologize. I'm sorry.
I was waiting.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Just to say
You need some
that
water?
it's interesting that the charter from Grand Rapids talks about, what you call it, takeover property, what do you call it? Annexation. And the annexed property would belong to that ward, wherever it would be. So it speaks to annexations. I don't know if we'll ever have annexations, but would it be proper to insert it, that any annexed property would be,
Yeah, I think that would go into a different part of the charter. There was an attempt to annex part of Lansing Township, if you recall, not that long ago. But that, in terms of the boundaries, that would be, until changed in accordance with the law, that would be an annexation. So that language, I think, would cover that, but we could possibly look at a specific provision dealing with annexation. I think I'm not sure which chapter, which article it's in, but yeah, there could be a place that we could look at that.
well, I don't know, sometimes you leave it open and there's a lot of discussion of what is and what's not. If we add it, for example, it would be there.
Mhm.
But I just want to point that interesting fact from the Grand Rapids Charter, when it talks about boundaries, the existing boundaries, and in the event of annexation, the area would be part of the ward that it's next to.
Again, I think what the language says, the boundaries of the city existing when the charter takes effect continue in effect until changed in accordance with the law. And that law would be, there's a law on annexation. And we could spell it out specifically, but,
I bring it as a point of information,
okay.
okay? Now we can go back to-
In 2-203.2, it says each ward shall have the same boundaries. I think that, until changed in accordance with law, I think that might be an appropriate place to insert something about annexation, since this is the total boundaries of the city in this section, and the other section deals with ward boundaries.
Are there any other questions? Okay, moving on to Chapter 2, Interpretation of the Charter, Powers of the City. Does anybody have any questions or concern about the language in there? Any amendments? Emery, do we have Kristen on, or how's that going to work?
I believe she's paying attention.
Okay.
If you have a direct question, let me know. And I will text you.
Okay, all right, just wanted to know. All right, Section 202, liberal construction of the charter. Any questions or concerns about that language? Hearing none, going to 203, severability. Any questions about that language? Concerns? Hearing none, going to Section 204. Any questions about how we're chopping up the charter in terms of identifying the specific provisions? Hearing none. Section 205, we're getting into definitions. And I guess I have our Vice Chair Simon.
Yes, under 205, the definition of person currently says person means both men and women and artificial entities recognized as persons by state law. I would propose that person means a human being regarded as an individual and artificial entities recognized as person by state law. And I did email that to all of you.
Okay, so,
So person means a human being regarded as an individual and artificial entities recognized as persons by state law. We have many citizens that don't identify as a man or woman. Okay.
So one more time, just so we get it.
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So
Thank,
it's
I'm sorry.
he wants me to repeat it. So
Just one more
person
time.
means a human being regarded as an individual and artificial entities recognized as persons by state law,
Okay.
meaning artificial entities would be LLCs or corporations, et cetera.
Okay, Commissioner Washington.
I want to thank you for that, because as I was going over this, I was like, how can we be more inclusive? And I truly thought Commissioner Simon will come up with something. So thank you.
Great.
Okay, any other questions or comments regarding that? Commissioner Boyd? Okay, so let's go ahead and vote. If we're going to be offering amendments, do you want to vote on those individually, separately, or just take them at the end?
Well, I would ask that, do any of the other commissioners have any proposal for definitions?
Commissioner Boyd?
I have one. Under officer, where it now reads, includes, but is not limited to, the elected officials of the city, the members of boards and commissions, and their executive staffs, all heads of departments and divisions. My recommendation is that we remove boards and commissions from the definition of an officer, because they are not paid employees and should not be treated as such. They are volunteers. So I think that should be amended. Thank you.
I'm just trying to figure out how that would impact the remainder of the charter. As we go through the charter, there's a number of provisions that recognize the term officer that include that. Okay, Commissioner Washington?
We are a commissioner that gets paid. We are a commission that does get paid.
Okay, but
Vice Chair.
we're elected officials, though. We're different from the other commissions and the other boards because we are actually elected by the citizens of Lansing. Yeah.
Emery, does Kristen have a position on that? Okay. All right. Commissioner Anderson, I'm sorry.
I think my concern with that is, even though they are volunteers, I think being on a board or commission, I would like to say that you're held to a different standard than any other type of volunteer. And so I would say, like, for example, if we wanted to say all officers are required to do an ethics training every year, I would want our board our board members and commissioners to be held to that same standard.
But should that be in the definition? I mean, I understand what you're saying.
If we're referring to them, I mean, I guess it could be, but that just means that later on in the charter, we would have to spell out specifically officers and board members and commissioners each time.
You know, I look at that language where it says officer includes but is not limited to, and then it goes on. To me, the intent at that point was to make sure it was as broad as possible, to include as many people as an officer, than to limit. But do we have? I mean, that's just the way I would read it, but we can always change it.
Your attorney says, I think the officer definition proposal should be reviewed for the impact on the proposed change.
Okay. So is she going to do that then? Is she providing that review?
I would assume.
Okay, all right. All right, we will be coming back to that. If you could note that, Emery, bring that back. I guess, any other suggestions under 205 for definitions? Commissioner Cui?
I think that we should alter probably the publishing part of the charter here under publishing. Is the newspaper circulation still relevant?
We're still doing it, but I guess, Chris, what would you?
Where it should be?
I think it does give us, because it says in one or more newspapers circulated in the city or by posting on the official bulletin boards of the city, so it does give us a bit of an out. This is something that I can honestly say clerks are struggling with statewide. We're a little bit luckier here in Lansing than many other communities who don't have any options.
So should it be adding the language of maybe some kind of electronic?
I think web
Circulation.
posting, a website would, in many cases, should qualify. In many cases, it reaches more individuals than a
Right.
newspaper or a
Right, so if.
bulletin board.
Right, so we should say either electronic website or some type of electronic communication should be added to that language as published, because that's what is mostly preferred now.
Vice Chair?
No,
Sonia?
maybe we'll put it in the wording, the city's official website.
And I think what we're going to do, I think one of the conversations we had when we were reviewing the charter was there is a specific section in the charter that deals with notifications. And I think updating that and then coming back here to plug in to make sure both pieces are consistent. And I think,
That way we don't miss.
right, yep, exactly. So Emery, if you could make a note of that. Commissioner Washington?
I just want to make the comment that this charter is not for today. It's for today and for many years to come. So I would caution us on being too specific on how we define it electronically, and maybe not just put on the city's website, because in another 5, 10 years, we are going to electronic is going to mean something totally different. So I would just caution us as we go forward to not just be focused on today, but to think about the future.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yeah, I would recommend language that maybe refers to, I don't know, like forms of media that are of no cost or something like that, that can cover a variety of different mediums, even if things shift in 30 years and who knows what we'll be doing. But yeah, and I think that way it covers like social media, website, like email, newspaper, bulletin, like whatever it is that's of no cost to the city or of limited cost or something like that. But
Thank you.
And
Comments?
Yeah,
Commissioner
just one last follow-up, and I appreciate that. I think what I would like to see differently, besides just where, is the expectation that there is a concerted effort to make the public aware. And right now, by newspaper and bulletin board, almost seems like we just want to post it somewhere to say we did it, and it doesn't matter who sees it. So I think our language should change also to make sure that we are holding the city to make a diligent effort that the public understands. Yes, yeah.
Okay, other questions, comments? Okay. I had a comment or a question for the attorney on under definition on the first page, line 28, where it says unless the context clearly indicates otherwise. I could not think of a place in the charter that we've gone through that this might pertain to that, but that kind of creates wiggle room, and it can be good and it can be bad. And I don't want to set up, this is our Constitution, and I wouldn't want to set up the ability to challenge something that something like this language would allow someone to come in and do that. So I would ask the attorney, is this language that is commonly put in to charters, or is this, I don't know of a situation in our current charter that this would actually apply to. And so, she can answer that at some other.
As I'm sending that question, Attorney says some notices are still required to be posted in a newspaper by law, but you can certainly add additional language to encourage posting and publishing in additional ways.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any comments or questions? The last question I would have for her is that on second page, line 30, where it says statute means a public act of the state of Michigan as it exists at the time that the provision containing the word statute is to be applied. Does that mean if we had a law that it was enacted in 78 and then was amended in 2020, and then it talks about statute, is it the 2020 version of that statute that controls, or is it the initial one? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Brian, I actually think this came up when you and I were on council together, and it meant the latest version.
The latest version?
Right.
Okay. I mean, that would satisfy my concerns. Okay. All right. Okay, so with the conversation, the changes that we have made, what I'm going to do is, why don't we revisit this section at our next meeting and get our answers and then make any changes that we're going to do at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any objection to that? Okay, hearing none, that's what we'll do. Chapter 3, rights of the public, city records to be public. Vice Chair Simon.
Yes, I'm sure that the clerk can offer us clarity, and I'm reading from my notes. But with the advancement of technology and the importance of transparency, I would propose that the charter includes a provision that requires the city to publish a comprehensive list of all data sets in a digital format that is easily accessible and searchable, and establish a definitive timelines for response time and associated fees for public record requests, which would include language delineating a clear process and response time for submitting FOIA requests and complaints from citizens online. Also, the charter could create a transparency commission to ensure the city's compliance with open data and public records. Would you like me to submit that?
Yeah, I would.
I will. I'll submit that. You're welcome.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments? So at this point, Vice
submit.
Chair will submit this link. We'll send it. We'll review this at our next meeting. And I think we'll also submit that, Emery, if you could, to everything, to Kristen to make sure she's up to speed on everything. And I guess in this, just to get some clarification with the clerk, you're the official record keeper, correct?
Yes, unless otherwise provided. So there are many records that I don't have, like
Okay.
Human resources records,
Okay.
as a prime example. There are things that are housed elsewhere.
Okay. Are there any changes or recommendations you would have with regard to this section?
The one thing that I think is a little bit vague and could be tightened up is shall be available in point 1. It says shall be available for inspection during regular business hours. Sometimes people have had an expectation of just walking in and being able to review and touch documents that may be sensitive in many ways, and through the FOIA process, they would be able to perhaps review, but there is an expense to the city of that. So I think some tightening of that phrase would be helpful to the city.
Or if you could pass that on, Emery, too. Thank you. There are other comments or questions? Vice Chair Simon.
Yes, this is directed to the clerk. Right now, with FOIA requests, there is a timeline that you're supposed to respond, correct?
That is correct.
But if the city doesn't respond, how does the city enforce that? And what are the penalties behind that?
So Freedom of Information Act is a state statute, and it does have timelines and possible penalties that would have to be through a lawsuit in order for someone to get those penalties.
Okay.
The city attorney in Lansing is the FOIA officer for the city. I am not the FOIA officer, although FOIA is related to records that my office has come to us, with the city attorney being the intermediary. So, you know, the range of FOIAs that the city gets is very broad. I mean, sometimes people are on a fishing expedition, and sometimes they know exactly what they're looking for. So, you know, I think we comply with the law to the extent that we can. But in terms of penalties, that I don't believe there's any automatic penalties.
Thank you.
Commissioner Washington.
I just have two comments. Where it says it shall be available for inspection during regular business hours, I think it's imperative that we put by appointment, because people, by reading this, anyone would have the expectation they can just show up, and there should be a reasonable expectation of what they're looking for before they show up. Now, I work in the legal department for the Department of Corrections, and we do house the FOIA section. And in FOIA, you have, I forget the particulars right now because I haven't worked with FOIA in a minute, but I think it's like 15 days or something like that to answer the request. But if you cannot meet that expectation, you can ask for extensions, and the penalty is done through lawsuit. And I know the city at this time has a difficult time for whatever reason meeting the timelines, but you can also, there are ways, if the request is too broad, you can say it's too broad in your answer. If it's not clear, you can say it's not clear. And there are things that are exempt from FOIA. So FOIA is not a terribly complex issue, but there are ways around it. And that's all I have to say about it.
Commissioner Lopez.
My hearing aid is not working very well. So you were talking about Open Meetings Act requirements? FOIAs. Yeah, FOIAs. That's what I was going to say as well. So that would be in accordance with state law? That would say you need a FOIA to do this?
Yes.
Should that be stated there?
I think that might be helpful, because I think this charter was written around the time that the state law was adopted, and I don't think it's mentioned at all in here. So I think rather than, right, but I'm not sure that the Freedom of Information Act was right around the same time as this charter, I think, in the 70s, the period of open government.
Yeah. Yeah. I know, because nowadays, if you want a piece of information, you almost have to FOIA everything.
Mm-hmm.
So if this is required by state law or in compliance, is that what we're talking about? Then is that understood, or should we put something in there to clarify that?
Yeah, I when we revisit this, I think from what I'm hearing, and I think what's going to be going out to our attorney, is that clarification is required. And so I think when we review that next Tuesday, well, I don't even know if we'll get it by Tuesday, but yeah. So next time we look at it, we should have that information. So, and I think the other thing you have to remember, at least from a government perspective with regards to FOIA, I think the directive that comes out of all of the attorneys, the city attorney's office, the AG's office, whatever, in their representation, they're saying anytime anybody asks for something, you tell them you got to FOIA it. I mean, there's a lot of confidential information, and when you get a FOIA request, it's required by law. So the person that's giving out the information is somewhat covered. And I think just from a liability perspective, so in terms of timing, in terms of timeliness to get the information, it really drags it out.
Yeah, because just reading this, shall be available for inspection during regular hours.
Right.
It's not going to happen.
Not.
So we might as well be truthful and say, following protocol, whatever that is.
Good point. All right, section 302, we just took care of earlier in the meeting. So we will revisit Chapter 2 next time, or maybe 3. And 3. Oh, yep, I'm sorry. Section 2, or pardon me, Chapter 2, we'll review, maybe not next week, but the meeting after that. Section 3, we've approved. And then Chapter 4, Governmental Cooperation, Section 401, Intergovernmental Cooperation. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about the language there? Any amendments? Hearing none. That's under point 1. Point 2, I did have a question that I guess I would ask the city clerk. On line 22, it talks about the city's appointee to the organization shall file a report on their activities with the mayor and city council at least once a year. Does that get done?
I don't believe so. I mean, the city has appointees to the various boards, Capillary District Library, Tri-County Office on Aging, Tri-County Regional Planning. And I think as things arise, they're reported on or action is taken, but
No
I don't think
annual
they're, no.
Commissioner Bauer, I'm sorry.
You know, in my tenure, I was on many of those committees or commissions, and honestly, I didn't even know that I was supposed to file a report. So if we're going to do it, we should enforce it or just drop it. Probably
Well,
drop it from the charter.
Yeah, I think having looked at the charter and the review that we did and what we're doing now, it becomes clear that there needs to be some training done with our boards and commissions about the roles and responsibilities, what the expectations are, and if they don't happen, what the consequences may be. So this is just one of those points. Commissioner Washington.
Thank you. To me, this actually would have been very helpful had it been actually done. I know the Parks Board does an annual report to council and the mayor and different ones. I know when we did the ad hoc on housing, I certainly put together the annual report. And the DEI committee that we put together did an annual report. I think these reports are really important. And I really think that it should be incumbent on the mayor and council to ensure that these are done. Because otherwise you have no idea if these boards or commissions or committees are even worth their time. You have to have some kind of a measuring stick.
Well, this language just covers the intergovernmental boards, but we have the same language throughout all of the
Exactly. We have
boards and
CAD,
commissions.
we've got the airport, we've got,
Yeah.
I think they're really important.
Okay. Any other questions? Any comments? Okay, 402, intergovernmental services and agreements, point 1. Any questions there? Comments? Hearing none. Point 2, any questions or comments? Hearing none. 1-403, judiciary. Pretty straightforward. Anything there? Nope. Okay, so as to Chapter 4, in terms of the language about filing the reports, do we leave that in as is, or are we going to circle back? We might want to review that in the future when we talk about the boards and commissions and the reports that they have to file. I think all of that should be consistent. So why don't we go ahead and approve Chapter 4 with the idea or understanding that we'll be coming back to it. Okay. It's been moved. There's support. Been moved and supported. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, passes unanimously. Chapter 5, penalties. This talks about a violation of the charter. It's a $500 fine, 90-day potential for jail or both. Any questions or comments on that? You know, I would, go ahead. Vice Chair Simon.
When this charter was established, the fine was $500. Moving forward and with inflation and things going, would you consider, I would propose raising it to 1,000?
So they didn't, the question I have is in here, they didn't say it was misdemeanor. Okay, all misdemeanors in Michigan, you can max out at 500 and that's it. But I don't know if that was the intent, if it was intent to make it a misdemeanor. Chris?
I believe that there is a maximum civil penalty under law for cities, and I think it was probably 500 at the time of this charter, and I don't know what it is now. So
I think it stayed the same.
I thought it at least went to 1,000, but it may have gone to more.
Well, this
but
is
we
not
can-
a civil penalty. This is a
Right,
criminal penalty
right.
because there's jail. Maybe that's what we should do. Do we want to make it a misdemeanor? Say it's a misdemeanor. That's okay. All right. Jody wants it to be a crime. Commissioner Dowd.
My question there is, we're identifying a lot of things in this charter that have just not been upheld, right? So in that case, that would be a violation of the charter. So does that mean that city employees are exempt because they're not doing reports or they're not doing things? So I think we got to be cautious of like what we're expecting and who's liable to violation of the charter and who's not. So if we're just saying the public is one thing, but if you are elected or an employee, you also have to follow what's in the charter. I'm concerned about what that looks like.
That's a good point. Commissioner Washington.
My concern is that nobody is ever found in violation of this charter, and it happens all the time. And I think there needs to be teeth to this, because I don't care who you are, if you violate our human rights ordinance that is in the charter, you need to be charged. And I have known of several people in the administration and the council that have violated this charter grossly, and there is never any accountability. And I think we need to find a way to put some teeth in this.
Commissioner Lopez.
Yeah, a couple of things. Number one, after the exit 90 days or both in the discretion of the court, could we also say, or as permitted by law, by state law?
Yeah.
Or is the court the state law?
This reads just like what a misdemeanor would read. I mean, it's money, potential prison, or both. I think this needs to get cleaned up. And I think to Jody, or to Commissioner Washington's point, or Commissioner Dowd's point, we could, I think, really expand these penalties and talk about civil penalties, not just criminal penalties. Talk about, maybe further defining or delineating what those penalties would be for. I think this would be the place to put them. So maybe we can, at the next meeting, bring back some language that would address that. And again, looking at all the boards and commissions and everything that happens, I think this would be a good place to put it. I would also like the commission to consider raising the 90 days to a 93-day period for misdemeanor. You have three types of misdemeanors. You have a 90-day, 93-day, and then a year. And at 93 days, what it does is anything over 92 days of potential jail, there's a fingerprint requirement that goes into the record. With a 90-day, there is no print requirement. And then at 93, you automatically get an attorney to represent you, public attorney. And at 90, you don't, unless there's likelihood of jail time. So I'd like to raise that up because when they do then enter the fingerprints, there's a background check, criminal background check that's run and would help to ferret out any other business that's there. So let's bring that back.
Yeah, the other question I had was seems to me a little bit maybe out of order, I don't know. This section shall not operate to limit or prejudice power to remove officers or discharge employees provided in this chapter. We're talking about the penalties for 30 or 90 days. I guess, how does it fit into this language?
I think in the further down in the charter, when you get to, like for example, council, they have a process in which to remove officers or remove other council members, and that process is also addressed. So I think that's what it's saying here is that's not going to impact that. They can still do whatever they want. I mean, that's the way I read it.
I don't know. It's kind of weird to me, but anyway, I just wanted to point it out.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Boyd?
I'd like to know a little history on this, and there's probably history on it from when the charter was approved. I don't understand why this is even in the charter, to be honest with you. I don't get it. I mean, who's going to violate it, and what are you going to do? You're going to take a city council person to court? I mean, come on. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I'd like to know what the history is on this section. Why is it even in the charter, and what were the founding fathers or the previous charter commissioners thinking when they put it in the charter? Thank you very much.
Okay, any other comments? So we're going to do kind of a rewrite on this. We'll get some of the historical background on it and bring that at a future meeting. So that's it for this article. All right. At this point, is there any other questions or comments regarding this review today? Does anybody have anything else? Commissioner Lopez?
I just want to give this document to our staff so that they can get a copy to each one of you. It's from Grand Rapids, just interested in this, just to see the differences. Grand Rapids has 3 wards, 2 councilmen per ward. They elect the mayor and a financial officer, I think. City controller. So it's interesting to see others, how they fit, maybe in a way as we're looking at ours. What can we take from it? Okay. So I'll give it to staff and they can make copies and send it to you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any other comments? Commissioner Dow.
Just the point of order for how we do this going forward. Is there a way, we got the board packet on Friday, and in there included your letter to us about reviewing and sending over information by Thursday, and so we didn't receive that until Friday. Is there a better way that you could just communicate directly to the commission? Because I did not receive an email of that communication for us to review this and submit proposed changes for the group to review.
Yeah, they came.
I just think it takes a lot of hassle out of us communicating directly. Like I'd prefer to receive a communication from you directly than get it in the board packet on Friday afternoon before the meeting on Tuesday.
I can do that. I need to get the material by Thursday though, so I can timely get it out to all of you. So if you want to send it to me, that's fine. I'll push it out. We'll work together and get that done. We can do that. Commissioner Boyd?
I think Commissioner Dowd makes a very good point. I know you mentioned it verbally at the last meeting, but I had my computer on, and I don't have it on all the time, but I had it on Thursday waiting for that directive, and I didn't get it, so I kind of blew it off. And then now we have a meeting this is an unusual week for us because we don't have 2 weeks, we have 1 week, and so Thursday is like Thanksgiving. And so do you want?
You can. I'm home. You can send it out if you want to do that. It's going to be a real tough week to make that, our stuff next week. We will be taking up Article 2 to start the review on that, and I don't know if we'll have the information to go back maybe to Article 1 that we did tonight. Commissioner Boyd.
And to that point, Commissioner Washington has asked that we not vote on the makeup of the council until January. Article 2 is all about the council. And so I would suggest that we skip that and move on to Article 3 or something. I don't know.
I didn't think Article 2.
Article 2 does address the makeup of the council, and we could either do as Commissioner Boyd requested, that we just move on to Article 3 and go backwards, or we can do all of Article 2 except for the actual wards and at-large, because it doesn't really affect the duties of council members.
Okay. Yeah, I think it addresses it in 2 and 3. We can go to 4, which is the mayor. It would be nice to keep them in the same order because we're going to be running up to, trying to keep everything consistent if we're going to be making changes and how one chapter relates or one article relates to another. Let me do a quick review of that and then get some information out to everybody for next Tuesday. It's going to be a hard meeting either way to get any comments back because of such a short week. Commissioner Washington.
I'm just going to reiterate, we could do all of that. Well, the makeup of council, if we say 9 wards, no at-large, 4 wards, 4 at-large, it doesn't make any difference to what the duties of the council members are. That is It's an incredibly important portion, but as far as the article goes, it's a very small portion. We could just do as we've done with these. We'll come back to this in January, but let's do the rest of it.
Okay. Mr. Andrews, did you? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, when we send our recommended changes to you, will you also be sending those to the attorney at that time? So, okay,
Yes.
thanks. Just in the spirit
And
of
I'll be sending them
efficiency.
to Emery, too. So, okay, now we're time to public comment on the agenda. Commissioner.
Okay, we have Nicholas Zandy, followed by Linda Appling.
Hey there. You already know who I am. I just want to make this extremely clear about. I've already said what I had to say about the makeup of what the city council should look like, but I want to bring up that the state clerk. I'm not going to be voicing his. I don't know if I should voice his opinion, but he brought up that we used to not have at-large, but sometime in the 50s, that's when the at-large seats were added. And I want this to be a coincidence. I don't want to assume the worst. I'm not like one of those crazy, like, white savior snowflakes who just tries to jump on an issue and assume the worst. No. What I am saying is it should be looked into. What was the then commission's or maybe the voters' motivation behind creating at-large in the first place? Because something about that seems kind of suspicious. Because during that time, during the 50s, there was the rise of the Red Scare due to the Cold War. And Senator McCarthy's crazy beliefs. And many people believe that and I've been told that some at-large seats were created because of said fears. And I think that needs to be looked into if maybe fear of communism may have had an effect, and maybe we should consider that as maybe as a motivation as to why we shouldn't have the at-large. And also, was there a racial motivation behind it to keep black representatives or non-white representatives in general off the council? Because, well, obviously eventually it just didn't work, but still, we need to look at those motivations and investigate it and look into it and realize maybe there could be something there that does showcase their motivation. And does it have something to do with race? Does it have something to do with fear of communism? Because that to me, I hope that it's a coincidence, but from what I know about during that time, that does not sound like a coincidence. And yes, I do believe, even beyond death, I think they're innocent until proven guilty on that issue. But we need to look into their motivations, and I know we can look into possibly the records through the clerk's office, through a FOIA request, to see if any motivation like that may have been what caused the at-large positions to exist in the first place. That's all I need to say, and I shall yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Next is Linda Appling.
Hello. For the record, my name is Linda Appling, and I represent, I am from the Eaton County side of Lansing, that all of you forget that we're here. First of all, I have spoken on this issue before, and I want to again state that I am opposed to increasing the number of wards. Frankly, the city of Lansing has had a decrease in terms of the population that it currently has. No, so it does not make any sense to increase the number of wards. The population within the city of Lansing has no focus in terms of minorities. And by that I mean, we do not have a donut within the city of Lansing. Rather, we have sprinkles. And specifically, its population as it relates to minorities. You must take a look at this when you look at the long term. Okay, Lansing does not have it. Okay, I've already indicated that it does not have a donut in terms of its population as it relates to minorities. Rather, Lansing has, as previously stated, a sprinkle throughout the city. This is reflected in the number of minorities that have been elected to at-large positions. Remember that the at-large positions are largely populated by minorities. As to funding sources for competitive elections, and I know this has been raised as an issue, the smaller the area is, the easier it is to influence the election by contributions to those particular individuals. Based upon that, it does not make any sense to substantially change what we currently have. As a reference, I would also like to point out, you mentioned the inclusion of areas outside of Lansing. The one that you did forget is over on Jolly and Waverly, where there was an election, and that particular area has been included in terms of Lansing. I would just tell you that. Once again, you forget about us over there in that area. Continually, you forget about us, but don't worry, I'll be here to remind you about it. Thank you.
Thank you. That was our final speaker signed in.
Now it's time for commissioner remarks. Anybody else have anything to say? Commissioner Washington?
This is just to my fellow commissioners. As you read the comments that I have on what I'm suggesting for the wards, I have actually addressed the population of Lansing. We are in the trajectory to increase our population substantially. Just in the next 12 months, we will be adding over 1,000 units, and we have plans to do many, many more of housing units. So don't think with today's mind. Think today and the future. We need to set ourselves up to be footed for the future. And I appreciate minorities on the dais, but as I stated before, the reality does not support that narrative. And I talked to Ms. Appling about it. Every council member from every ward and all four at large are all from protected groups. We are well represented with diversity.
Commissioner Boyd.
I appreciate what you're saying, and I appreciate that you've sent us a memo. I would like to say that I put my position in writing to all of you before I had my knee replacement surgery, which has gone well, thank you very much. And right now, my feeling is that we should leave the wards as they are and reduce our at-large from 4 to 3. And I'm keeping an open mind. I'll look forward to hearing from folks in the neighborhoods when they come out to talk to us. But I just want to make sure that you understand where I stand. Thank you.
Considering your knee standing, very good. All right. Any other remarks? Hearing none, we're adjourned.